Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Ethan and Melissa were seen by everyone who knew them as the perfect couple. They went to family gatherings, were frequent guests at friends' birthday parties, and never showed any signs of problems in their relationship. Ethan, in particular, was known for being a devoted man who deeply believed in the importance of a close-knit family. He often told his friends that becoming a father would be the greatest fulfillment of his life, a dream he'd carried since his teenage years, when he imagined the day he could hold his own child in his arms. Whenever the topic came up among friends or at family events, Ethan's eyes lit up with a sparkle that revealed his genuine desire for a child. Melissa, on the other hand, didn't seem to share quite the same enthusiasm, though she was discreet about showing her true feelings. In reality, being a mother wasn't something that held a special place in her heart. There wasn't that same gleam in her eyes when Ethan talked about having kids, but she still went along with the idea without much conviction, just to avoid disappointing him or causing unnecessary conflict. Their routine seemed perfectly fine until the day Ethan decided it was time to take a big step, getting the house ready for the much-desired baby. For him, painting the room that would become the nursery was more than just a household chore. It was an act of love, hope, and care for a child he didn't even know yet, but who already filled all his thoughts. One Saturday morning, Ethan woke up especially excited. He got up early, put on some old clothes he had saved for times like this, and drove to the nearest store to buy paint cans. He picked out the colors carefully, light blue and white, soft tones that conveyed calm and warmth. When he got home, he started working right away, gathering brushes, rollers, and old newspapers to protect the wood floor that Melissa loved so much. While Ethan began painting the walls, humming softly and imagining every detail of the decor, Melissa walked into the room. She looked upset, her face slightly tense and her arms crossed in disapproval. Ethan paused for a moment and, looking surprised, asked if something was wrong. Melissa took a deep breath before answering, choosing her words carefully. With a tone more serious than usual, she explained that she'd need to stay away from home for the week because of a severe allergy to fresh paint. Ethan thought it was strange, since in all their time together he'd never heard her mention this allergy, but he chose not to question it. After all, he trusted his wife and didn't want to spoil that important moment with doubts or suspicions. Melissa quickly added that she planned to spend time at a spa, saying she desperately needed a break to relax. Ethan calmly agreed, though he felt a vague unease in his chest. Something inside him whispered that something was off, but he preferred to ignore the alarm that was going off in his heart. Maybe he was just being overly worried, he thought. As soon as she left the room, Melissa went straight to her phone and called Jessica, a longtime friend. Speaking quietly and sounding a bit uneasy, she asked Jessica to confirm her story if Ethan asked anything about the trip. Jessica agreed to help without too many questions, but she clearly sensed something wasn't right. Melissa, however, didn't share any additional details about what she was really doing that week and ended the conversation quickly. Without Melissa noticing, Ethan, still bothered by his wife's odd explanation, started picking up on small changes in her behavior. She was always on her phone, smiling discreetly when certain messages arrived, and seemed distant, lost in thoughts that obviously didn't include him. These little clues began to eat away at Ethan, planting a seed of doubt in the relationship that had once seemed so perfect. He tried to push away the bad feeling, but every time he saw Melissa distracted or acting mysterious, he felt his heart tighten. The room that used to symbolize hope now seemed emptier and quieter than ever. Even so, he worked hard to keep painting the walls with dedication, trying to convince himself that his suspicions had no real basis. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Lying next to Melissa, who had fallen asleep quickly, he stared at the dark ceiling and realized his restlessness wouldn't go away until he knew the truth. Right then he made a tough decision, one that went against all his moral and ethical principles. For the first time in all their years together, he needed to find out what Melissa was hiding. Very carefully so he wouldn't wake her, Ethan picked up her phone, hands shaking with guilt over this invasive act. The moment he unlocked it, his heart raced and his hands turned cold. He skimmed several harmless conversations until he finally got to one with Jessica. His breathing grew shallow and uneven when he saw a line that felt like a knife to his chest: "If Ethan asks, confirm we're traveling together." He stood frozen, eyes locked on that sentence, unable to believe what he'd just discovered. The woman he loved and hoped to build a family with was lying, getting ready to do something that would tear him apart. Ethan carefully put the phone back beside Melissa and left the room without a sound, unable to stay by her side at that moment. Sitting alone in the silent living room, enveloped by the darkness of the night, he realized he had to act wisely. His heart was broken, but he needed to keep his emotions in check to handle this situation with dignity. He stayed up the entire night, thinking about the best way to deal with the betrayal he could no longer ignore. That night changed Ethan forever. He was no longer the same man who had been painting a room hours earlier, dreaming of the future. Now his future felt threatened by deceit and a pain he'd never experienced before. Morning had barely arrived on Sunday when Melissa woke up. She moved quietly around the bedroom, packing a carefully chosen wardrobe in her suitcase. Her heart pounded, not just from the excitement of the trip but also because of the secret she was carrying. Elsewhere in the house, Ethan stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep, listening to her every movement with a mix of hurt and disbelief. Melissa slowly zipped up her suitcase, grabbed her phone, quickly went through her messages, and took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to keep going. Her ex-boyfriend, Ryan, had already confirmed the flight and booked a comfortable suite at a luxury resort in Miami. Everything seemed so simple, so perfect. She just had to stay calm for a few more minutes, enough time to leave without raising suspicion. While she finished getting ready, Ethan finally got out of bed, dressed slowly, and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. He said nothing while he heated the water, and his silence weighed more than any words could in that moment. Ethan already knew everything, but he needed to keep his emotions hidden just a bit longer. It was hard not to show the disappointment he felt, realizing that the woman he loved was about to betray him, that this wasn't just a relaxing trip with friends. Melissa walked into the kitchen wearing a rehearsed smile, trying to look calm. Ethan watched her every move like it was in slow motion, noticing little things he'd never seen before, how she avoided looking him in the eye, or how she kept tucking her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. Small details that now meant so much. After quickly downing a cup of coffee, Melissa announced it was time to head to the airport. Ethan offered to drive her, but she quickly declined, saying Jessica was already on her way. He nodded quietly, letting one more lie pass by, just for a few more moments. Melissa noticed Ethan's discomfort but chose to ignore it, preferring to believe he suspected nothing. They heard Jessica's car pull up out front, and Melissa rushed to say goodbye. Ethan walked her to the door, gently took her hand, and, speaking softly and with an oddly calm voice, gave her a small box wrapped in blue paper with a perfectly tied white ribbon. Surprised, she looked at the gift and asked, "What's this, Ethan?" He smiled faintly, though his eyes didn't match that smile, and answered with unsettling composure, "Just something special for you. But promise me you'll only open it when you get to the spa. It's a surprise." For a moment, Melissa felt a pang of guilt at this unexpected gesture. A flicker of remorse flashed across her face, but she pushed it aside, putting on the same facade she'd prepared for this trip. Without hesitating, she smiled, promised she'd do what he asked, and hurried out the door, leaving Ethan behind. Already in the car, Jessica asked about the mysterious gift, but Melissa avoided talking about it. She was too busy convincing herself that she was making the right choice by following her heart, despite knowing how much she might hurt Ethan. During the entire drive to the airport, she repeated to herself that she deserved this week away from the routine and from dreams she didn't share with her husband. She had to believe that to cope with the guilt. Hours later, sitting next to Ryan on the plane, Melissa felt free for the first time in a long while. She allowed herself a broad smile, ignoring the warning signs her conscience kept trying to send. Ryan held her hand during the flight, assuring her these days would be unforgettable. Melissa closed her eyes, trying to take in that promise as absolute truth. Meanwhile, back home, Ethan couldn't pretend to be calm anymore. The image of the text message on Melissa's phone kept replaying in his head, haunting him like a persistent nightmare. All day long, alone, he wrestled with his darkest thoughts, trying to figure out where everything had gone so wrong. Painful questions echoed in his mind. What was missing in their marriage? What had he done to deserve this betrayal? Even with his heart in pieces and weighed down by deep sadness, Ethan decided not to give in to despair. He needed to keep his wits about him, to do something that would clearly show his pain without losing control. With that in mind, he began carefully planning his next steps. Meanwhile, Melissa and Ryan arrived at the resort. The place was everything they'd hoped for: a large pool with crystal-clear water, elegant suites, and a fancy restaurant with a view of the sea. They settled in, unpacked, and wasted no time enjoying the romantic, carefree atmosphere. For the entire next day, Melissa let herself soak up every second with Ryan. She tried to forget everything she'd left behind. Between drinks, laughter, and light-hearted conversations, she managed to bury the unsettling feeling that still lingered deep in her mind. But at the end of the night, after dinner, back in their room, she remembered Ethan's mysterious gift. While Ryan was showering, Melissa carefully picked up the wrapped box and sat on the bed, examining it. She felt curious but also an inexplicable nervousness. Gently undoing the white ribbon, she opened the blue box and found its contents inside. She saw a box of condoms and a little note, folded neatly. Her heart raced before she even read what Ethan had written. With shaky hands, she slowly opened the small piece of paper, and each word felt like a stab to her soul. Don't forget to use these. Because if you get pregnant, the baby won't have a father. Right then, Melissa felt the ground vanish from beneath her feet. Everything around her went silent. Her entire body trembled, overwhelmed by a crushing sensation of shock, guilt, and fear. She looked around frantically, feeling as if Ethan were there in the room, silently watching. Ryan walked out of the bathroom just then, noticing her shocked expression, but Melissa only managed to whisper that she needed to be alone. He quickly dressed and left, realizing there was no point in arguing, leaving her drowning in regret. In that luxurious and chilly room, Melissa understood for the first time the real weight of her choices. Tears ran silently down her face while she held Ethan's note against her chest, knowing that she had just destroyed something she'd never be able to repair. Ethan knew everything now, and there was no going back. She stayed there on the bed, tightly clutching that little note. Her breathing was uneven, and her heart pounded as if it would burst. Each word on that piece of paper cut her soul like a sharp blade. It wasn't just the message itself, it was the painful awareness that she had ruined everything with her own hands. For a few minutes, she didn't move, listening only to the echo of silence around her. Ryan had left the room at her request, but that didn't bring relief or reduce the crushing guilt. That night, the luxurious hotel room felt like a suffocating prison with no escape. As if on autopilot, she grabbed her phone and tried to call Ethan. Her desperate mind begged for some sort of response, anything from him that might ease her agony. But every time, all she got was the cold, uncaring voice of his voicemail. She tried over and over, met with the same silence that made her feel even more desperate. Melissa walked over to the window and looked at the dark night sky, searching for any sign of hope. The stars that used to look so welcoming now felt distant and cold, mirroring the emptiness she felt inside. Her thoughts drifted back to Ethan, picturing him painting the nursery, smiling with that genuine, pure happiness she had never truly shared. Now, however, she missed that sense of security that only Ethan had ever given her. Driven by impulse, she went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, trying to clear her head. The mirror showed a woman she hardly recognized, pale, puffy-eyed, and clearly distressed. Melissa felt anger at herself, at the poor choices she'd made, and how easily she destroyed the genuine love she'd had at home. There, in that elegant white marble bathroom, she realized that this wasn't just a week of fun or a brief escape, it was actually the punishment she'd signed herself up for. Determined to fix things however she could, Melissa went back to her phone, frantically trying to find a flight home sooner. Her hands shook as she typed, and anxiety grew by the second. But she soon realized, to her utter despair, that there were no available flights that could get her back quickly. The resort seemed more remote than ever, like it was cut off from real life by invisible barriers. That feeling of helplessness was crushing. Melissa lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, drowning in her own thoughts. Guilt felt like an open wound throbbing with pain. All night she couldn't close her eyes. Her mind kept replaying Ethan's words, echoing endlessly in a mental torture she couldn't stop. Morning arrived, and Ryan returned to the room, obviously confused and worried by her miserable state. With little patience or empathy, he asked if she was okay. Eyes red from crying, Melissa shook her head no and asked him to leave her alone. He tried to say something, then gave up, realizing it wasn't worth insisting, and left, making it clear he didn't want to deal with her emotional turmoil. In the following days, while Ryan enjoyed the resort's amenities, Melissa barely left the room. The spa, the pool, and romantic dinners no longer mattered, replaced by a deep sense of loneliness and emptiness. Every moment felt unbearable, and the lack of any word from Ethan, who kept ignoring her desperate calls and messages, only made it worse. At one point, Melissa decided to call Jessica, begging her friend to step in on her behalf. Jessica, who had initially helped Melissa cover her lie, felt terribly guilty once she realized how much Ethan was suffering. Her tone on the phone was harsh and distant. With few words, Jessica said she couldn't go along with it anymore and that Melissa had to face the consequences of her actions on her own. That was like a final sentence. Melissa really was alone. She ended the call slowly, wandering around the room, feeling completely lost. The confidence she had before was replaced by regrets and doubts. For the first time, she saw that Ethan hadn't just been a gentle, devoted husband, he was the only man who had ever truly loved her. And she'd lost him in the worst possible way. The remaining days of that endless week dragged on, each minute more painful than the last. Melissa couldn't stand the constant feeling of anxiety crushing her chest. She never once managed to forget Ethan's face, his soft, kind voice, or the way he'd always treated her, with respect and affection. Now she understood just how precious he had been. When the week finally ended, Melissa packed in a rush, desperate to leave the room where she'd lived through her worst moments. Before leaving the resort, she took one last look at the place that now stood for her biggest failure, feeling like a piece of her would stay forever, trapped in that painful memory. During the flight back, soaring above the clouds, she closed her eyes and accepted that going back to her old life was impossible. Everything had changed for good. And for the first time, she felt genuine fear of what the future held. Melissa's chest tightened and the taxi slowly turned onto the familiar street where she lived with Ethan. Every house, every tree, every corner felt different now, as if they were memories of a life that didn't exist anymore. As the car moved down the quiet street, her heart pounded with a heavy, bitter expectation. Finally, she caught sight of her house, the place that once meant safety, love, and comfort, now seeming strangely dark and way too quiet, like it no longer recognized her. As she got closer, Melissa immediately noticed something that made her legs go weak and her body tremble. On the sidewalk, right by the entrance, her suitcases were neatly lined up, piled up carefully, like someone had spent a lot of time planning that gesture. A wave of deep despair crashed over her as she realized Ethan had no intention of letting her set foot in the home that used to be theirs. With trembling hands, she paid the taxi driver and slowly got out, overwhelmed by the shame and humiliation of seeing her luggage out in the open. Some neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, watching the sad scene like it was some sort of show, but Melissa hardly noticed. her own pain too strong to think about anything else. When she reached the suitcases, she saw a small note attached to the top handle. Her icy fingers struggled to unfold the paper, and she read Ethan's strong, decisive handwriting. Those few words made everything around her crumble. I hope this week was worth more than the life we were building together. Good luck. Melissa stood there on the sidewalk, motionless, unable to cry or react. Her heart was in pieces. It felt like every bit of joy disappeared in that instant. The message was so simple and direct, making it clear that Ethan wanted no more conversations. No talking, no explanations, and no chance for forgiveness or reconciliation. She tried calling Ethan again, but his phone was still off. Every call went straight to voicemail, as though even hearing her voice was more than he could stand. Feeling lost and desperate, Melissa looked at the house once more and realized there was no point in trying to force her way in. With a heavy sigh, she picked up her suitcases and walked to the corner, silent tears rolling down her face at last. With nowhere else to go, Melissa called her mother, Betty. She sounded worried, as if she sensed something terrible had happened. Melissa couldn't bring herself to explain everything right then. All she managed was a shaky request to stay at her mother's place. Betty agreed right away, no questions, no demands. The call was brief, but Betty knew something serious was going on. Arriving at her mother's house, Melissa came in slowly, feeling like a little kid again. Betty met her with no words, just a strong, comforting hug, letting her know she was welcome no matter what had happened. That night, on the old couch in her mother's living room, Melissa finally told the whole truth, down to every painful detail, out loud for the first time. As she spoke, she realized each word cut deeply, exposing her weakness, her selfishness, and the damage she'd caused. Betty listened silently, holding her daughter's hand without judging or scolding her. But Melissa could see the deep sadness in her mother's eyes, sadness not just for what her daughter was going through, but for Ethan, too, who had always been a kind and beloved son-in-law. When Melissa finished, she went quiet, waiting for some sort of response, hoping to hear something that might ease her pain. Betty took a deep breath, squeezed Melissa's hand tighter, and said calmly, "Honey, there are some mistakes we make that can be fixed, and there are others that leave a permanent mark. What you did didn't just hurt Ethan. It hurt you, too. You knew it was wrong, but you went down that path anyway. Now you have to face the consequences." Melissa said nothing, just lowered her head, feeling the weight of those words sink into her heart. The conversation ended there, without any more talk, leaving Melissa fully aware of the reality she had to face alone. In the days that followed, her mother's house became a quiet and somber refuge. Melissa barely left her room, ate very little, and rarely spoke. Her thoughts stayed locked on Ethan, on the bad choices, and on how different life could have been if she'd decided otherwise. The nights were long and painful, filled with haunting memories she couldn't escape. Meanwhile, Ethan had disappeared into total silence. Even close friends couldn't get in touch with him, as if he had decided to vanish to heal his wounds somewhere far away. Little by little, Melissa realized she had lost more than just a husband. She had lost a true friend, a loyal companion, and a future she could no longer reach. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later, quick and impersonal, just as Ethan wanted. Throughout the hearing, Ethan said nothing and avoided looking at Melissa, while she silently cried as she signed the papers that ended the most important chapter of her life. After it was over, Melissa left the courthouse feeling even more alone and empty than ever. She watched Ethan walk to his car and drive off without a single glance back. In that moment, she knew for certain she'd never see him again. Melissa got into her mother's car and closed her eyes, feeling an emptiness that seemed impossible to fill. It was a scary, overwhelming new feeling. For the first time, she realized she didn't know who she was anymore or where she should go. All that remained was a long and painful road of learning, built on the ruins of everything she herself had destroyed. After the divorce was final, Ethan moved to another city, looking for a fresh start away from all the painful memories. He chose a small coastal town, far enough to feel free but not so far that he lost his roots. In this new setting, Ethan learned that even after so much hurt, there was still room for new dreams and hope. Slowly, his broken heart began to heal, little by little closing the wound left by Melissa's betrayal. In that peaceful town, Ethan met Sophia, an enchanting woman who owned a cozy bookstore in the city center. Sophia had a gentle smile, bright eyes, and a warm laugh that could thaw even the coldest of hearts. She noticed the heavy burden Ethan was carrying but respected his boundaries, offering support in a subtle way to help him rebuild his confidence. Without rushing anything, they built a relationship grounded in trust, patience, and genuine caring. One day, while they strolled along the beach at sunset, Sophia asked Ethan about his deepest dreams. Staring at the ocean, he answered quietly and without hesitation, "I've always wanted to be a father. It was something I planned with such care, but for a while, I thought that dream had died inside me." Sophia gently squeezed his hand and looked deep into his eyes, replying firmly, "Your dream isn't dead, Ethan. Maybe it was just waiting for the right time and the right person." Right then, Ethan felt something he thought was gone forever: hope. He realized Sophia, with her gentle and sincere way, was giving him the real possibility of being happy again. Patiently and lovingly, their relationship grew strong and solid, and Ethan finally felt he was with someone who truly wanted to be with him, too. 2 years later, on a bright morning, the loud and lively cry of a newborn echoed through the maternity room. Ethan carefully cradled baby Benjamin for the first time. Feeling the weight of his son in his arms, Ethan cried silently, realizing this was the exact moment his heart was finally complete. Looking at Sophia, smiling despite her exhaustion, he felt deeply grateful for the chance to start over and for the certainty that fate had given him a new opportunity. Meanwhile, Melissa's life took a very different path. After the divorce, she tried reaching out to Ryan, hoping to find comfort in the one person she thought could console her. But for Ryan, that resort getaway had been nothing but a fleeting distraction. He turned her down outright, saying he had no interest in a serious relationship or any commitment to her. That was when Melissa understood, with great pain, that she'd lost not only Ethan but any chance of rebuilding her love life at that moment. She went on a few dates, tried different ways to distract herself, but nothing filled the emptiness she felt. Nothing made sense anymore, no smile felt real, no conversation sparked her interest. Life became a series of gray, monotonous days. Over time, Melissa gave up trying to move forward on her own. With nowhere else to go, she stayed at her mother Betty's house, dealing day after day with the memories of her mistakes. Her mother tried to help, urging her to look for a job, take new classes, meet new people. But Melissa couldn't find the strength or motivation to do anything. One afternoon, while sitting on her mother's porch, Melissa watched the sun set. A little kid ran by on the sidewalk, followed by parents laughing and smiling. She felt her chest tighten as she remembered Ethan's heartfelt dream of starting a family. She was faced with a scene she could have had, the life she might have built with him, if she hadn't thrown it all away for a meaningless fling. Time went by, and Melissa's days were swallowed by painful memories and deep regret. More and more withdrawn, she saw how she had thrown away not only her marriage but also her youth, along with any chance of being truly happy with someone who really loved her. The cheerful, captivating smile that used to define her disappeared. Now she was left with dark under-eye circles, a tired expression, and a constant silence that worried her mother. In another place, Ethan watched little Benjamin take his first steps on the beach, with Sophia smiling by his side. Life had given him the chance to be happy again, and he hadn't wasted it. At the same time, Melissa faced the consequences of her own choices alone, carrying the emptiness left by her mistakes. Both of them ended up getting exactly what they deserved. Ethan, after so much suffering, finally saw that true love can still prevail even after life's toughest challenges. Melissa, on the other hand, learned in the hardest and cruelest way possible that you don't always get a second chance when you play with the feelings of the people who love you most. In the end, it was clear that the decisions we make shape the future we end up living. And that's a lesson Ethan and Melissa would never forget. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.